Blue Diamond Filmmakers. Started in 2007. So here we are, 11 years since it was started. And this June will mark 10 years since the release of its first film, The Price of Loyalty. Welcome to Blue Diamond Retrospective. This is a 10-part series in which I will be discussing the history of Blue Diamond, as well as canceled projects, what lies for us in the future, and really just explaining how these past 10 years have been for the lives of many of us here in this nice small little city of Columbia, Missouri. This is episode 1, entitled Small Beginnings, which will detail the origins of Blue Diamond Productions as well as the filming of its very first movie, The Price of Loyalty. Enjoy. In January of 2007, I was talking with my friend Chris Mooney about the possibility of trying to make a movie. I had been very interested in the process of film production and had been watching a lot of behind the scenes on DVDs and that sort of thing, and become more and more interested in the whole process of making a movie as much as I enjoy watching them. And I had actually tried to make a couple movies with my friends about 5 years earlier. We had tried to make some movies with an even older camera, really just messing around with the camera, but it was the initial spark of interest in it, but I didn't really bother pursuing that idea until a few years later. When I was like, it would be fun to actually do that, only this time go in with a plan and a script and do the whole process and do it properly. So I began writing a couple of scripts. There were a couple of things I was trying to write. One I was writing was a movie about a bunch of kids doing bicycle racing, which is something that I did as a kid, and I thought it'd be kind of fun to do a movie about something that was part of my childhood. I never had a good title for it. The working title for it was called Thunder Bikes. It was never going to be used as the actual title, but I needed a title for it until I could figure out what the world I was going to call it. I never, in the whole history of that project still sitting on the back burner, ever came up with a proper title for it. But it was going to be about like 8 kids who end up racing against each other, and in the end, for a big finale, they want to race a big, long 10-mile race along a 5-mile trail that's close to where I live, and they were going to race it back and forth. So it was going to be a fun little film to do, but nobody was really interested in it, so I was like, well, what can I do that would spark some interest? This is around the time I started also watching YouTube. Started getting on YouTube, really discovered it in like 2006. Started watching that, along with actually Google Video, back when Google Video was a thing. I started watching James Bond fan films, saw them, or parodies. Like there was some GoldenEye live action parodies, which I thought was fun, which is why we came up then with the idea of doing Golden Idiot, which was going to be a parody of GoldenEye. We were going to make fun of the traits of GoldenEye. What was going to happen was a guy was going to be playing his game, he was going to leave it turned on, and then when he walked away, GoldenEye physics basically were going to be turned on. He was going to look at his watch, and suddenly when he kind of peeks up, everyone's frozen, and the music's playing and all that. It's going to be like the GoldenEye pause menu, and people were, when they fight, it was going to be like and slappers, and it was going to get more and more ridiculous as it goes until it's revealed that it's just a dream. Or is it? You know, that sort of a video. It was going to be like not even 10 minutes long. Wasn't really anything special, but that's about as much as we knew about what we were going to do with that project. We'd started some preliminary work on it. When I finally was like, you know, what would be more fun? What if we did one of these fan films like these other guys I've watched? I've had said that a lot of people I inspired to make fan films. So I thought it'd be interesting to finally really talk about what inspired me to make a James Bond fan film. Who was the one that inspired me? Well, honestly, out of all of them, I would have to say Kyle Volk. Kyle Volk was my inspiration to make fan films. He had made a couple that were on Google Video. There was Moonraker 2, and there was another one I'm trying to think of that I think was only on Google Video. But the first one I actually saw, I think maybe the first fan film I ever saw, was Dr. Yes. Then they made All Time High, which had come out. And around the time I was really starting to work on the script, their one, Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, their final one, which actually had Brett McKenzie playing Bond and Kyle Volk was playing the villain, came out while I was still writing the script for Price of Loyalty in 2007. But those films, I enjoyed them. They were fun. They were, some of them had some decent length to them. I was like, we're reaching up near 30 minutes and that sort of thing. 30 minutes, 40 minutes. That seemed to be a good range. Shame Lady, I saw, which was like 52 minutes, 53 minutes. That one really impressed me. I was like, ooh, yeah, now if we can do this kind of quality, that'd be great. I saw the old, they released a special edition of it, the old Moonraker 78, one of the original fan films. I think there may have been a couple others that were out there, but there wasn't a whole lot at that point. There was still some of the early days. But Kyle Volk really was my inspiration. I was like, you know, we could do this. Then I came up with the idea, what if we do one that honored each Bond actor? And I wanted to do the whole idea of doing Connery, Lazenby, Moore, and Brosnan and Craig. And I figured by the time we were done, Craig would probably be finishing up. Little did I realize that Craig would be going on as long as he has. So I figured, you know, by the time we got to the 6th film, he would basically be done, and then we'd be free and clear to be done with that series, and maybe revisit it later after the 7th actor was done with his films. But, so we decided to start with Lazenby just because, one, it was going to be easier. I wanted to test the waters a little bit, play it a little safer, make it a little easier on ourselves. Plus, our Secret Service is one of my favorite Bond films. So that was a good inspiration for me to write it. And of course, when it got started, I started with Never Forget Yesterday, which was an interesting script, which I actually still have. I never bothered to throw it out. It's I mean, it had like, I had added lines later and stuff. It's a very primitive script. I think it's a decent number of pages still. But, you know, of course using like Microsoft Word, you know, to write it. It totally didn't have, like, there was no battle scene. It just went from the bomb scene straight to them taking out Miller, because I didn't think we could ever do a lot of things. That was the problem. I was limiting myself a lot with, oh, what can we do, what we can't do, instead of writing a script and then toning it down according to whatever situation we were in. I was limiting myself early. There were a lot of script changes by the time we switched the... we switched it around. Plus, I wrote this one completely by myself. And then when we got to the rewrite, which is the Price of Loyalty one, I had Chris Mooney help me with the rewrites. We completely rewrote it. We took the core of Never Forget Yesterday and completely wrote it a little where it made a little more sense in terms of the dialogue and everything. And I mean, it was a fun little script to write, and we got about finished about mid-June, and then we started filming on July 13th of 2007. We actually started the first day of filming at like 10 o'clock at night, the card game scene. We started doing casting early before that. I convinced my brother to try to be the villain. Honestly, he's told me in retrospect he never figured we actually finished the movie, so he didn't mind just spending a couple afternoons helping out. But then it was like, the further we got down the line, the more he realized that we were more serious than he thought we were initially with it. Of course, Chris was going to play Jack Miller. We had already discussed that. The character of Jack Miller, of course, was a mix of names. Came from Jack Ryan and Sean Miller from the Tom Clancy novel Patriot Games, which I was reading at the time I was writing the script, so I thought it would be funny to mix the names together and create Jack Miller. And that's why in the paper, in the Shadow of Revenge, that Bond's looking at, the original leader of Dark Moon that Jack Miller replaced was called Sean Ryan. That was another wink at that whole name grab. Peter Grant, Red Grant, inspired the Grant part of his name. Remember From Much With Love, since that was one of my brother's favorite villains, so I thought I'd help him with that and just name him Grant anyway. We struggled for a while finding an M, so those scenes kept getting pushed back until finally Chris was able to talk his brother Sean into playing the role, which I thought he did a really good job, and it was nice getting him to reprise his role later on in Shadow of Revenge. Amanda Ellison, she was pretty much an early pick I had for Moneypenny. She was one of Chris's friends. She was one of my friends too, but she knew Chris better. And we were like, yeah, you could totally play Moneypenny, it'd be great. She was there for one day of filming, I think, for the price of loyalty. So it was easy for her. And we filmed her office in Chris's house. Filmed a lot of locations in Chris's house. We did not have that many locations picked out. We did a little bit of locations. We figured we had like 3 different locations that we knew we could use. Most of it would be left to the imagination. M's office was one of the only times we had to try to construct a set, because we took Chris's room, we moved some bookshelves around, and we put the desk. It's the same room as used also for Mark Tyler's office, just redressed. That's really all it is, with the beds behind. There's a couple of times where you basically can see around the set. That's how primitive our filming was. The tapes we had for one of the cameras, we had 2 different kinds of cameras. That was another issue we had. To do multiple cameras in that film, we had 2 different cameras. So, and what we had was some old tapes for the ones, so that creates that graphic, which you see on the side of on most of the footage. You see this like weird graphic thing going on. That's because of the old tapes. Well, my camera was used on some shots, which did not have. So most of the time when you don't see the graphic, that means it was being filmed on my camera, and if it was being filmed, Chris' camera had the graphic effect, which was kind of annoying, but it was what we had. We had to replace the original camera that he was using because it just lost all the footage on us, which was the first day of filming, which was the whole card game scene, which was me, Chris, Richard, Scott, and Todd, all as players and that whatnot. And we lost that scene. We lost the original Q scene where Scott Alexander was playing Q. Pretty much played out the same way Sean played it, except a little bit different in terms of like the whole DQ and stuff. But it's same location, most of the same dialogue, same gadget, of course. Taser Watch I felt was gadget we could use a gadget we could do. We could just make an electrical effect and just have him zapping people. So wouldn't be complicated is what we're trying to do, is limit our complications. At that point, we weren't even sure how we were going to do the effects, because we didn't have an effects guy yet. Chris said he had a few people he was going to talk to, but at that point we were really flying blind when we started, I'll be honest. We had jumped into this one and we were realizing as we were going, we were like, we have really jumped into more than we really can chew at this point, and that's why it kept being like longer and longer. We were filming more and more days. We had several days that we just filmed us that battle scene. That battle scene, I think, was like 4 different days of shooting just to get all the shots. Kept running around the same house with guns. Of course, we were playing it safe and not covering up the orange tips on the guns. At that point, we were still just deciding, you know what, people are just going to have to use their imagination is what we decided. We're playing it safe. We're just going to leave the orange tips. We had a limited number of airsoft guns too, so that didn't help us. We gave the AK-47 up to Grant to use. Whenever I used the machine gun, I wanted to use the MP5. And then I used the Glock initially for Bond's pistol sidearm, because it was like the only pistol we had. Then in November, we finally talked Sean Phillips into joining us, because he saw I was showing him some of the footage and stuff, so he was like, okay, you guys are serious and trying to actually make this film. I wouldn't mind joining you guys. We needed a ride, mostly. We needed someone to drive us there, because my parents were unavailable and I didn't have a driver's permit. I didn't have a license yet, I only had a permit. So we needed someone to actually drive us to the location. So Sean got us there. Right off that first day, he was like in it. He was ready to just make this really work. He said he would do the vis effects. He thought it'd be fun to work on that, as well as he provided a few more airsoft guns, which is why then Bond switched, because we couldn't find the Glock anymore. So then Bond's pistol switched over to a Colt 45. So finally we were like, we need to buy some more airsoft guns. So I pitched in for the P99. So we would actually have one of Bond's pistols. We couldn't get a PPK at that point, but we could have the P99 with a silencer. So I thought that was cool. So then we had Bond running around with the P99. So finally it was something. Getting closer. Everything started to fall together. We got Sean to play Q. I think that was the first day of filming with him. I know his first filming shot was him coming in with Grant, when Grant's like Merry Christmas 007 and all that. So that was like when Sean first started with us. We filmed a couple more times after that, and then we were done with principal photography by the end of November. Then we did some extra shots in February of 2008. I think it was the end of February, so about 10 years ago now. We were filming some extra shots, which is all the Red Lynx guards attacking the Dark Moon base, because we realized, wait, we didn't shoot any of the Red Lynx people attacking. We only showed the Dark Moon people and Bond's interaction with them. We didn't show the Red Lynx people attacking the base, like outside. We filmed the inside of them attacking, but we didn't shoot anything outside. We shot some outside stuff with the Dark Moon people, so we just shot a few extra shots and just made it all come together. Then I started putting the film together. Then I think it was May I finally released the first trailer, and that was delayed because I had some trouble using the editing program I was using was iMovie 06. Yeah, I was using a very old iMovie to make an hour-long movie. That program is not designed to make hour-long movies that are this complex. So I was trying to find every trick I could to make the project, to make it work. Finally got it all put together, but I made a few errors and I had to go back and I had to fix it. That's why the aspect ratio got all screwed up, because I completely muddled it up when I was editing, because I still didn't know what I was doing. Because literally, I had no experience with making movies. I had read a few things. I had one limited book on it, And that was it. So we literally were flying blind making this movie. So it was like, okay, what do we do about this? We are flying so blind that, I mean, it's like, I don't even know how to edit. I knew how to, alright, this is how you splice a couple clips. My dad had shown me, like, this is how you splice the clips together. This is how you use the program, because he used the program before himself. And that was it. And I basically was just go. And I had to figure out everything else, how to put sound effects in, how to, Sean worked on the visual effects, gave them to me. We got all there, and finally made a DVD. And finally in June, we had a movie. And we actually had completed a movie. And that was a big deal for us. Like, actually completing the movie meant that, first off, we were serious enough that we would actually see it through to the end. And second off, it was like, okay, they're gonna do it. This is good. People were very impressed with it in terms of just knowing that we had no money, no experience, no real talent. I mean, we had a few people that had done some theater, but really no one had any acting experience. Nothing. Released the movie on YouTube. Comment here and there. Really at the start, really didn't get much. It started to pick up right around the time we started filming The Shadow of Revenge. So late 2008 is when it finally started, like, people started, more and more comments started flooding in, because suddenly here we were with the longest fan film to that date. At that time, that was the longest fan film to date at 1 hour and 5 minutes. And it was like, it was extremely primitive. It's an extremely primitive film. But it seemed to inspire people because it was a step above what had come before, which showed that that Bond fan films could keep growing, is what I've often felt about the movie, is that it showed that you can do more. You can do more than a 10-minute video just making fun of Bond. You can actually make a story, your own action, make your own. Because at that point, a lot of them were parody. I mean, even ours still did borrow heavily on elements of Armored Service, which is why The Shadow of Revenge started to change in terms of its script, because I started to also realize that. I was like, we can do our own thing. We can create our own story. We don't have to base it on the actual Bond movies. So I think, along with everyone else, I learned that we could do more as well, which is why The Shadow of Revenge is so much bigger than The Price of Loyalty. Because I was like, we can do more. And now people believe that we can do more because they saw what the first film was. So this only was going to open up the gateway to more people wanting to get involved, because everyone, all my friends and families, everyone started seeing it. A lot of people at my church I was going to, everyone saw it, everyone loved it. Everyone was like, wow, you actually made this movie. You actually made this really fun Bond movie. Can I be in the next one? And then suddenly we went from a cast of 8 to a cast of 30 in the next film. So, looking back on all that, I must say, it was a learning experience. It was a massive learning experience. I don't think I wouldn't have that big of learning experience making a movie until I started going to actual classes. It would be gradual. I'd learn a thing or two here and there with each film, but it wasn't until I went to actual taking film classes that I would have that big a leap of learning. Like, that's what The Price of Loyalty really is. It was a learning experience. It was something we had to test things out, which is why I always tell people, don't worry too much, don't stress too much on your first film. Use your first film to learn. That is the most important thing I think I can say about your first movie. Learn from it. Because that is going to teach you how to make the next movies, and each one is going to build off the other. You'll learn what not to do, how to do this better, and always don't worry about watching those films again and going back and being like, oh man, I'm going to go back, I'm just going to look at it and be like, oh, they suck. No, don't do that. I mean, I recently rewatched The Price of Loyalty. I was like, oh yeah, there's a ton of things I would change now. But I actually now know that I could do that. And I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't taken the risk, taken the step, and launched and made this movie. And Chris and everyone else's support with that, I've always been so grateful for, because they helped launch what would be known as Blue Diamond Productions. And the Blue Diamond name came off of the original films I tried making in 2002, which involved, like, there was like this magic power inside a crystal. It was a blue crystal, only we decided to call it a diamond instead of crystal because it sounded cooler. So Blue Diamond is why it was called Blue Diamond Productions. That is actually the name, off of the original. The Master Gem was the name of my original, very first film I ever tried making. It was called The Master Gem. And it was about this crystal that was supposed to have a blue light in the center of it. And that's why it's Blue Diamond. The Master Gem, The Adventure Continues, The Max Factor, and Double Trouble. Those were the original 4 films we tried making. None of them got finished. Not a single one. I wish I could go back and find all that footage, but I think a lot of it was lost. The Price of Loyalty footage is not lost though. We have all the original tapes. All the raw footage I've got with me. So I can always, if I find the right kind of camera, right way to extract the footage, because unfortunately the actual computer files have been lost, but I kept the raw footage. So if I could always pull it out and find every bit of footage we filmed for that movie. Which is, I think, great to just preserve that. That's why I haven't thrown out those tapes. I'm like, those are memories. That's the important thing about making fan films and making early films. That's something else I feel that I want to say to you all. Looking back now, in retrospect, here I am 10 years later. What would you have me tell you people is, yeah, do it for the fun of it. Enjoy it. Memories will be made from these movies you make. Don't, I know, stresses will be high. You will sometimes be really mad at people. Sometimes, because you'll be like, why can't you do this right, or why isn't this working, or what, you know. But don't let that destroy anything. You want this movie to be made of memories. Yes, there will be good memories, there will be bad memories, but those good memories will always outweigh the bad ones. Do it because you love it. Don't do it for comments. When I made Price of Loyalty, I didn't expect any comments, any views. But I did it because of a handful of people that made it, could watch it, and enjoy it. And if one person said they liked it, that was good enough for me. And that's why I did it. Yes, sometimes I forgot that along the way. As most people will. You kind of forget and you'll be like, man, everyone just kind of hates my films and they keep making all the comments. But remember why you started. That is the very important thing I learned, and now looking back on it, I understand it now much more. Yeah, looking back now, 10 years later. So, with that, we then moved on to our next project. The Shadow of Revenge. The most ambitious project we thought we'd ever do. And still remains the longest James Bond fan film ever made. And that story will be told in episode 2. Thank you for watching.